An El Nino pattern is expected to build once we approach the summer months, as we do see that during the months of June, July, and August, the chance of an El Nino does increase, which should play a pretty major role in terms of what type of conditions we should expect in the United States for this summer, where we could potentially be in for much warmer than average summer thanks to a higher likelihood of an El Nino building. And we do have a smaller chance of a neutral phase, but most likely we will be in a weak El Nino for this summer. In terms of what typically happens during an El Nino pattern in the United States, we typically see much warmer than average conditions throughout the entirety of the lower 48. This is as a result of the jet stream being a lot further northward, to the point where the cooler air that's located closer to the Arctic regions is less likely to move southward and bring more instability in the United States. So it's also typically drier, but we do see more moist than average conditions for the southern United States. However, it's good to point out that the El Nino pattern isn't as significant when it comes to the conditions you should expect for the summer in comparison to what we see during the winter time, because of course during the summer the jet stream is already relegated well further northward of the United States, whether it's an El Nino phase or not. So even if it were a La Nina phase, it's unlikely that the jet stream would move far south enough to bring any major differences when it comes to the summer conditions you should expect. So we need to take so we can't really take the El Nino as the only indicator of alone of how the summer is going to turn out, but it's less likely we're going to see significant jet stream dips that will allow at least a little bit of cold air to move into the United States. But we definitely need to take a look at other factors to really determine what type of conditions you should expect this summer for the United States. I think the El Nino pattern that will have a bigger effect in the United States is the hurricane season pattern, where of course typically during an El Nino we see a lot more sinking and stable air in the Atlantic, which not only suppresses tropical cyclone activity, but it brings more drier than average conditions to certain portions of the tropical Atlantic, especially the Caribbean. So there is a possibility that this stable air could move northward into the southeastern portion of the United States and definitely suppress thunderstorm activity. But again, we need to take a look at other factors such as the sea surf temperatures, because if the sea surf temperatures are warmer than average, it could offset the fact that we're going to see more stable air in the southeast and overall in the tropical Atlantic. I will make my hurricane season video within the next few days, so make sure to stay tuned for that. I'll go more in detail on how the El Nino effect and how the sea surf temperatures will affect the hurricane season. But in terms of what the conditions you should expect this summer and the significance this El Nino pattern has on the southeast, just know that we're more likely to see more stable and dry conditions in the southeast and potentially less thunderstorm activity thanks to this specific pattern that's associated with an El Nino. But we need to take a look at other factors, like I said before. We can jump to that conclusion that it's necessarily going to be like that for the southeast. So since this summer will most likely be a weak El Nino, it's best to look back at previous weak El Ninos during the summer and see how they turned out when it comes to precipitation anomalies as well as temperature anomalies. And if we were to take a look at the precipitation anomalies, we do see that during weak El Ninos, such as the 2009 summer, the summer of 2004, 1991, 1997, 1976, we do see that it's typically drier than average for the southeast. And I think a big reason that could potentially be is because there's less tropical cyclone activity in the Atlantic during an El Nino. So there's less likely to be a tropical cyclone that makes landfall and brings a ton of rain along the Gulf Coast. That could be a potential reason, but also it could be due to the fact that the polar jet stream is further northward, so we're less likely to see jet stream dips move southward and bring potentially more thunderstorm activity. Whichever the reason it is, it typically is a lot drier than average for not only southeast, but including the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region and small portions of the northeast. And it's a little bit more moist than average right around Maine, as well as the Rocky Mountain ranges, but it's very low on, but it isn't necessarily a huge departure from average, where we do see the precipitation is is higher than average. So it should mainly be average. Other factors will most likely play a bigger role in terms of precipitation anomalies, and when it comes to the areas that aren't really that far from average. We definitely need to take a look at other factors as well before we can determine the exact precipitation anomalies you should expect in each area. When it comes to the temperature anomalies, we do see that during weak El Ninos, the temperatures tend to be much cooler than average, especially for the western half of the United States as during the weak El Nino summers. But I'll take it with a grain of salt, because we do see that the threshold isn't necessarily extremely far from average. So we won't necessarily see the temperatures be like this for a weak El Nino year like this one, as it's fairly close to average for the most part. So most likely other patterns will play a bigger role in terms of precipitation, the temperature anomalies you should expect in the United States, which we'll take a look at right now. So this is a CFS, what the CFS model, a climatology model, is forecasting for this summer when it comes to the 3-month precipitation anomaly. We do see that the CFS model expects the precipitation to be a little bit higher than normal for much of the Midwest, as well as the Rocky Mountain ranges, slightly drier than average along the northeast coast, as well as the Pacific Northwest, and then pretty much average throughout anywhere else in the lower 48. And we do see more moist than average conditions in Florida, but I'll take the CFS model with a grain of salt, because it has been wrong quite several times before, and it's more difficult for the CFS model to forecast long-term forecasts when it's beyond the 2 to 3 month mark, which in this case it is, because the earliest this goes to is June and July, and it's still currently March. So I'll take it with a grain of salt, but there is that possibility that maybe we could see a little bit more of a moisture intrusion in the Midwest, but I'll definitely take this with a grain of salt, this climatology model. Taking a look at the 2-meter temperature anomaly, we do see that it's it's pretty much very similar to what the CFS model states with every summer, where it expects warmer temperatures all across the board. And while I will agree with this for the most part, we also have to keep in mind that the CFS model has always been very biased to bringing much warmer than average conditions to the United States. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but this could very well be the type of temperatures you should experience this summer, thanks to an El Nino, where the jet stream is going to be well further northward. And another point that I'm going to show you guys right now. I think one of the biggest indicators that will determine what type of conditions you should expect this summer, especially right up along the coast, is the sea surface temperatures anomaly. And we do see that along the Pacific West Coast, we do see that the sea surface temperatures are much cooler than average. Of course, this is as a result of how cold the temperature's been throughout the western half of the United States this winter, and the number of atmospheric rivers that have been moving through, bringing a stronger northerly flow to bring that cooler air further southward up along the coast. So I'd say that, so it's likely that I don't think that we're going to see the temperatures rise along the sea surface along the coast to a point where we're going to see a major difference when it comes to sea surface temperatures as we approach the summer. So along the coast, since the sea surface temperatures are cooler than average, I'm expecting cooler than average temperatures for the most part, since the sea surface temperatures, especially along the west coast, play a big role in terms of the temperatures you should experience along the coast. So I expect cooler than average conditions as a result. And then up along the east coast, I expect the sea surface temperatures to be warmer than average, continuing on on into the summer. So I expect the temperatures along the coast to be warmer than average for the most part, and that could lead to more moist than average conditions as well, thanks to warmer than average sea surface temperatures, which will enhance the humidity. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So here's my summer forecast for 2023. I'm expecting the conditions to be warmer and more moist than average for the southeast. This is due to the fact that the sea surface temperatures will most likely be warmer than average, so that should allow for more convective available potential energy to develop along the southeast, for more thunderstorm activity to develop, despite an El Nino bringing that typically brings more stable than average conditions to the areas surrounding the tropical Atlantic. And there could be hurricanes possible as a result of the warmer than average sea surface temperatures, which should enhance the possibility that it should be more moist than average. And then I'm expecting conditions to be warmer and drier than average for the most part for much of the United States. This is due to the fact that there's a drought going on right around the Pacific Northwest as well as portions of the Midwest, and droughts are very difficult to get rid of. So I expect that to continue into the summer, and warm and dry soil heats up a lot faster than moist soil. So we should continue to see warmer than average conditions for much of the United States, and I'm expecting it to be warmer than average for the Northeast because the sea surface temperatures should be a little bit warmer than average, and then I'm expecting it to be cooler and drier than average right up along the West Coast, thanks to the fact that the Pacific is much cooler than average, which should influence the temperatures you should experience right up along the surface. So this is my summer forecast for 2023. If you want even more in detail forecasts regarding the summer conditions you should expect in your specific location, just make sure to comment down below, and I'll make sure to give you guys more in detail forecasts regarding what type of conditions you should expect this summer. So make sure to comment down below if you're interested. But thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content.